All right. Hi, this is Jon Reed to Genomica. I've got Rebecca Wettemann again. How you doing?
Hey, John. I'm great. How are you?
Unfortunately, we don't have your dog Patrick, but that might be for the best, given it's a podcast, and Patrick's contributions might be a little off topic.
He can be a little vocal.
Yeah. We do have a stuffed animal. Maybe I'll get a picture of that for the feed, but I think Patrick's going to destroy your stuffed animal that you got at Salesforce Connections in about 10 seconds.
I'd say the over-under is probably about 10 seconds, yeah.
Anyhow, so we are on the clock because I got an interview to go to, and you're going to the airport. But it's a good time to kind of take a look. Oh, here we are in day two after a full day and then some keynotes and some morning stuff. Now, you and I, we were both on the CRM Players watch party of the original keynote from yesterday, the opening, and we each shared some expectations for the keynote. But I think those could kind of translate to the show as a whole. So can you tell us what were a few of the bullet points on your slide that you were kind of thinking about in terms of what you were hoping Salesforce would cover?
Sure. I was hoping to hear about real results and real numbers, not just interesting pilot stories, but broader adoption and real enterprise value. Also hoping to hear about how Salesforce was helping bring customers along, both in terms of moving them to the modern marketing cloud stack from the sort of heritage applications, but also in helping them think about what they need to do with their data, what they need to do with their brand guidelines, what they need to do with their processes, what they need to do with their orgs to really take advantage of agentic AI.
And now we fast forward 24 hours and maybe not the most sleep we've ever had. What have you assessed in terms of how Salesforce has done with that? Not just on the opening keynote, but just in general in the sessions and the second day keynote and all of that.
Sure. I think they did a good job of talking about the value that customers are getting and putting some practical kind of numbers and examples behind it. I think there's more work to be done in helping customers understand how they get from where they are today to what their aspirations are for agentic AI. And I think Salesforce has to recognize, too, that it is critically important right now that they are clear with customers about what is the art of the possible, what is the future and the roadmap for these marquee customers, and frankly, all customers, versus what they're actually doing today. Because if a customer looks around the room and feels like everybody else has done it and it's been easy for them, they're likely to get frustrated, they're likely to get challenged, and they're likely to have more challenges kind of delivering on that value proposition with Agentforce.
Yeah, I had a few bullets as well, and I may get into those at some point in the conversation. But in my piece that I wrote last night, which was mostly on a really good session I attended on GEO, which is sort of the evolution of how brands get discovered online, generative engine optimization or whatever. You can check it out on Genomica. But in the beginning of that piece, I talked about there's two things I've really been looking for this spring at shows, and I just haven't really had an experience of a vendor really nailing both of these. One was present an energizing vision for customers to rally around, not a token maxing workplace dystopia. So that's one, because I think there's a lot of sort of AI stress bubbles hanging in the air for customers around what is this going to be a good experience for me or not with AI?
Right.
And then the other piece, show customers how to get there, where the rough edges are. And that's your thing around proof points for where the AI results and ROI can be found doesn't hurt either. Just in terms of those 2 points, I thought from my experience at the show that the energizing vision, especially for marketers, jumped out, like with the marketers as makers sort of sloganing. But it wasn't just the sloganing, it was all the illustrations they had of all the pain points that marketers feel and the administrivia of what they deal with.
Administrivia, I love that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and just looking at why haven't we thought more about how to apply quote unquote AI, agentic AI, and all those flavors into this? Like, because it's so clear that so much of this could benefit from further automation and, some of the campaign management examples, and now the potential with Contentful and what you can do with content at scale as they get that integrated. I don't know about you, but I think in terms of the energizing vision, I thought they did better this year than in years past. I think they really gave marketers in particular something to take home there?
I think not only did they give marketers exciting things to take home, they also gave them products that are either GA or almost GA, which was really, really important if you think about getting people excited about what they see at events and being able to actually go home and use it.
Was there anything you were thinking about in particular there?
Just the general product announcements that they made around the coworker and the other capabilities that were in the keynote that were either GA now or GA in June, which is 2-3 weeks from now.
Right. Yeah, I heard more GA in the keynotes than I've heard in a while, or this is about to be GA. And attendees really like hearing that, even if they have to figure out a little bit sometimes or on the licensing or whatever, at least they know it's there.
Right. And there was also a lot of talk too about you can just turn it on today. It's already in your product. This isn't an additional SKU. This isn't more money that you have to spend, which I think for folks worried about this sort of AI spending uncertainty, that was very helpful to hear.
So you said you found some good discussions around results. I didn't get as much of that, but I was like hunting a bunch of different sessions and one-on-ones. What did you pick up on in terms of how customers are getting results and some of the proof points there?
Well, it really falls into two different buckets, right? It's a individual productivity thing, which is nice, but not necessarily the kind of transformational stuff that we like to talk about. And then there's here are the things that I'm able to do today that I just never could have afforded to do at scale without AI. Some of the optimizing campaigns, being able to change campaigns mid-flight based on data, having the AI recognize and suggest how I pull the kill switch on a campaign that's not working and reallocate budget before it's all spent. It's that kind of stuff that has not been cost effectively managed by marketers and has often been where the kind of money pits happen in campaigns. Whereas if I have the advantage of AI at scale to be able to analyze in real time on an ongoing basis how my campaigns are doing, I can be much more quick to react and to reallocate those resources to somewhere where they really make sense.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I wanted to hear a little more. I'm making a little bit of a distinction now between results and ROI, and the reason being that the ROI thing is sort of like jumping to the top of the queue because of all the stories in the general press around companies like Microsoft and Uber, for example, having to cut off Claude code for the year because they're token maxed for the entire year already. And then someone that ran up a bill for $500 million because they had unlimited tokens on Claude, whatever. And so I think there's a lot of awareness around this. And I even heard one of our fellow analysts grumbling about this afternoon, like, where was the talk about tokens? And I thought Salesforce had a bit of a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to talk more about all the proprietary models that they built and how when you build your own models and you also use smaller and open source models, you can take a lot of the edge off the dependence on the frontier models and the token maxing pricing schemes. And so I thought they missed an opportunity to talk a bit more around what their AI engineering looks like and how that creates forms of cost control. And I'm kind of speaking out of school a little bit here because I haven't talked with the Salesforce executive about that yet, but I might in my next interview. But I think they could have really, I think put some reassurances around some of that. So that was interesting that they didn't do more with that because they spent so much time building their own models and they don't talk about it.
You're absolutely right. And I would say there's really two things. There's the explaining the overall theme of token maxing and why it doesn't necessarily apply to this audience.
Right.
Like Patrick did a great job explaining yesterday about how the token maxing stuff happens in the developer environment, in the coding world, not in the sales and marketing and commerce world, at least not today. Right. I think making that clarification for the audience here would have been really helpful. But to your point, also explaining to people the kind of things that they're doing around governance and controls and kill switches, because they are doing things. The model choices is another example of how they're investing and making the costs more predictable and the risk lower for customers. but they're not doing a good, consistent job of articulating what those things are yet.
So you and I are
In
I don't
violent
want to say,
agreement.
yeah. And I don't want to say we're necessarily jaded, but I think we have seen a lot of shows. And so what I'm always looking for is what can surprise me. And I did run into a couple really interesting surprises. Did you have any that jolted you a little bit? Because that's why we get on planes, right? Is to get surprised by stuff.
Frankly, I was surprised by how much they announced from a product perspective and how much of it is available. And I understand that the pace of change is changing in enterprise software, but unusual for Salesforce to not just be announcing so much, but have so much that customers could already get their hands on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Salesforce has been having obviously a lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups in terms of the Wall Street assessment of, and I'm just a little bit surprised by some of that because the level of sophistication in some of the agentic architectures and the product development, this doesn't feel like a company that's just discovering AI agents and kind of casually putting some of them into their product. Like this is a serious engineering endeavor. And one thing that did surprise me in all of that was, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised because it did show up in the earnings around Slack and the importance of Slack and Slack adoption, but Slack is looking less like a WTF acquisition and more like a genius acquisition in the context of some of this headless discussion. Because part of the headless thing, which has been debated in terms of how well did Salesforce articulate that originally out of TDX, and Stuart Lackland's written about this on Diginomica if you want to dig into it. But part of the headless thing is sort of, where do you want to work? Where do you want to do your work? Maybe you don't want to do your work inside of an enterprise software application. And just talking with customers here and hearing Salesforce also talk about, maybe we want to work out of Slack. I talked with a customer this afternoon that's like, yeah, we do a lot of our team members are doing the bulk of their interactions and calling up data and all of this is through this Slack-enabled agentic environment. I'm like, yeah, I didn't expect the extent to which that was really going to feel, I guess, intuitive, right? Not like, hey, what about Slack? Do you care about Slack? But more like customers saying, we love this, we're using it. Like the organic part of it,
Yeah, and why in a lot of cases Slack is going to make more sense for certain AI projects than Agentforce.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
So not to put too fine a point on it, but does Slack become an Agentforce competitor?
Yeah, and if you're Salesforce, wouldn't you rather that Slack be a competitor than a third party coming into your customers? I think you'd rather have it be Slack. So yeah, and I had a really interesting conversation with the CEO and founder of Assemble earlier, which is ASYMBL. Probably right about it, but they do a lot of talent and recruitment agents. But they work out of Slack a lot. But this is an example of a customer where he talks very naturally about his so-called digital workforce, almost to the point where it can be a little jarring. And he's like, 60% of our workers are digital, right? Like he's thought through, he's thought through all of this, right? And he's deployed all these agents. He's built a talent intelligence agent of his own, deep experience with Agentforce. And then I contrast that a little bit with your discussion of more what you described as sort of heritage customers.
Yeah.
Which is such a diplomatic phrase. So where do you think those customers are at? Have they seen some inspiration from this show in terms of how they can advance?
It is very rare to sit in a keynote and see people's faces. And one of the things that we noticed in the keynote yesterday was people were not on their phones. People were engaged. People were paying attention. And I think that speaks to the inspiration and the excitement and the interest and the curiosity that was in the audience. Now, to capitalize on that, Salesforce still needs to help customers see what the path is. What is the path of least friction from where they are today to really taking advantage of agentic AI? Being prescriptive about things like data mapping, about things like brand guidelines, about what is the minimum viable org, the MVO, that you need to be able to be effective with Agentforce and with the new agentic marketing and commerce capabilities.
In one of our last sit-downs, we did a podcast about your CX fragmentation research at Valoir. And, a big part of that research, the conclusions lined up with some Diginomica's research in other areas, which is that data silos and data fragmentation are a real impediment to getting the kinds of results out of AI, or I would argue even basic analytics
right.
that organizations need. How does that research sort of stack up with what you're hearing at this show and where customers are at?
Big customers are facing incredible pressure to do something with AI.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they recognize that their data may not be in place or their processes may not be integrated and streamlined, they are still going to try to do things with AI. So I think the best thing that Salesforce and frankly other vendors can do today is be very prescriptive about, here are the things that you can do, here are the limitations and risks associated with these approach. And depending on where you are from a data perspective, from a process perspective, from an architecture, from an org perspective, from a brand guideline perspective, here are the areas where you probably want to spend more time and effort before you're going to be ready for an agentic prime time.
Yeah, like how do you get those parallel tracks going of getting started with something, but not losing track of what your research has uncovered, which is at some point you're just throwing lighter fluid onto problems with AI.
Right.
Interesting. So were there any other standout things you wanted to note from your time before you head out to your next airport? And I hope it doesn't take 3.5 hours this time.
Me too, Jon. Me too. I think that the headless stuff is really, really interesting. And obviously we're in very early days of this, but I see a world going forward, not tomorrow, but at some point where we're looking at not just the cost of a token, but the efficiency of a token, right? And the idea that I might decide I'm going to do some things completely declaratively with workflows because that's the lowest risk and the most cost-effective way to get me there. Or I might sort of take an Uber strategy, right? If I'm taking my boss to the airport, I might spring for an Uber Black versus if I am just going for coffee with my friends, I'm probably okay with the beat up Toyota, right? Companies are going to start to look at how do we use kind of Uber pricing models to decide when do I spend for a more expensive token that maybe gets me a higher quality of result or a higher predictability of a result, right? Versus when do I spend less for something that may not give me as perfect as an outcome as I might get from the Uber Black LLM.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and the headless part is gonna. I think we could debate how effective that phrase is for customers at this moment in time. Because I would argue it's a little more about just telling customers we want you to use whatever environments you want to use, and we don't want to be proprietary and lock you in. I think that's the message that really resonates. Not so much headless, but which vendors are going to be willing to sacrifice the illusion of control over things in order to benefit from the underlying potential. So I'll give you an example from my interview today that I referred to with Brandon Metcalf over at Assemble, where I asked him, are you seeing advantages for this Salesforce platform approach to AI versus like using a best of breed? And he was like, well, we are using some stuff from Anthropic and Gemini and blah, blah, blah. But what he said was that he wants all that governed and orchestrated on the Salesforce platform, and that's where they're moving to. So it's not like they're going to stop using non-Salesforce stuff, but Salesforce has made that case that they're the trusted governance platform for this customer. Isn't that ultimately what brands want? Instead of trying to say, always use our agents, always use our stuff. It's like, well, no, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll locate our stuff from within Anthropic, or maybe you'll do some stuff independent of us, but you still want us managing it. In my mind, that's the ultimate goal, but you have to be smart about it, because if you try to exert too much control, I think you're going to lose that.
Sounds like the early days of cloud to me.
Yeah, it does. Wow. Oh gosh.
Woo! Full circle.
We back again. Yeah. We covered almost everything I wanted to. I still have this thing around, like, I understand why Salesforce pushed marketers as creators, and I like the idea of freeing marketers up to do what they're best at, I think, which is connect with customers and also collaborate with sales, which we could have gotten into, I think, a bit more if we had more time in terms of like how that can be broken down a little bit in a good way with these new agents. But I do want to sort of get back to my little pulpit speech from yesterday around, there's a lot of creators out there that are really talented that I think should not be overlooked. And sometimes the best marketers are the ones that know how to tap into the great creators and help get their work out into the world. And I just want to say that there's a lot of creators whose work was used to train these technologies that are not benefiting from this economy now, and they should, because they're talented people. And so I'd just like to say that when you talk about marketers as creators, just remember that there's also a big creative community out there that I think deserves opportunities and has brilliant ideas. And ultimately, that's what gets me excited, is about how do we enable human inspiration, but do it in all the ways that Salesforce talks about, of scale it, repurpose it, personalize it, get it in a million languages if you want, but don't lose track of that is all I want to say. But,
well, and hopefully some of the announcements this week and what we're seeing in the space also helps those marketers kind of rediscover their muscle memory as creators.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you do get into that brainstorm feeling again, and you're not checking a million tools, because that's the other marketing thing right now, is like, I think the light bulb is going off. Can I just interact in one environment instead of checking 20 different applications? Oh my God. I mean, we do it at Diginomica. We're in and out of so many applications, but we are working on agentic stuff to try to close those gaps.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time, but it was great to catch up. Thank you.
Always fun, Jon.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.